I'm an academic primarily. I'm a university lecturer rather than someone working in a think tank. I've done a lot of work with think tanks, Institute for Economic Affairs, Adam Smith Institute, and other ones across Europe and the USA. But I'm not one of their employees, I'm not one of their staff, I'm not part of that world in the same way. So I'm hopefully going to give a slightly different perspective, a different attitude towards this. Barbara said we should talk about where we've gone wrong. I'm going to start off by talking about 2 successes, which I think will then hopefully illustrate where the rest of it's gone wrong. Why have I only got 2 successes to talk about rather than 20? Okay. Now, my field is tax. I do a lot of work arguing for lower taxes, arguing for tax competition, arguing against European Union harmonisation of taxes, all that sort of thing. I've had a couple of successes in UK tax reform. I managed to persuade the previous government, the Liberal Conservative coalition, to increase the income tax threshold significantly so that we took people who were, we didn't quite get it up to the minimum wage, but basically people who are earning on or about the minimum wage would not be paying income tax on that level. So rather than having lots of additional new government subsidies, government money for people on low incomes, I said, why don't we just take them all out of tax altogether? Makes it much simpler. We finally got that through about 3 years ago. The threshold went up to about £11,000, which is pretty close to the minimum wage. The other one that we had a success with was bringing in a flat rate capital gains tax. So rather than rates going all the way up to 40%, we had a single flat rate of 18%. Astonishingly, we got the Labour government to do that. So these were both things that I'd been writing about for years. How did they actually come about? This is where I think tanks are essential, but not sufficient. So we need think tanks, we need the ideas they're generating, but we then need something else to take it that stage further and get it to actually be implemented. Because the way I got these 2 changes through was in partnership with a politician. It wasn't done purely from the think tank world. It was a politician who saw something I'd written for the Adam Smith Institute, thought that sounds like a good idea. He got in touch with me. We worked on tax reform. We spent years talking to government people, talking to civil service, lobbying, public relations and things, and we got through 2, okay, quite small, but we got through 2 changes. Now, 2 things about that. First, you have to get your hands dirty and talk to politicians. And a lot of think tank people don't actually like that so much. They like to think up the ideas, but don't actually like to go out and put them into reality. Okay. The second thing is, once your ideas are out there in the political world, you've lost control of your baby. It's off there and it's going to grow and it's going to do something else. Now, he and I came up with this wonderful tax reform plan. It was the most comprehensive, perfect tax reform thing you could think of. It was about 120 pages long. Everything costed, and looking at second order effects, how it was going to change the economics and so on. Did we get this wonderful balanced tax reform programme through? No, we got 2 little bits of it through. Perhaps 6 pages out of 120. But we got them through. If we hadn't gone down that line, if I'd sat there and said, no, it's all or nothing, this is a process that all hangs together, nothing would have happened. So 2 things, I think. First, yes, you need to get those ideas out initially. If I hadn't written that initial idealistic paper, the politician wouldn't have picked up on it, he wouldn't have started working on these ideas, and nothing would have happened. So you do need that early ideas, and you need to keep pushing those. for years, even when you think no one's paying attention, because at some point someone will. But then, once you've got an opportunity to drive it, you've got to be a lot more pragmatic. And you've got to accept working with other people and accept that your ideas are going to change and that you're not going to get everything that you want in there. And I think that second bit is where a lot of the think tanks fall down. They're very good at the ideas, they're very good at coming up with the schemes, they're very good at the philosophy. They're not so good, certainly the ones I've worked with sometimes, at actually driving that change in. And that, I think, is the challenge there. Okay. I'll talk later about Brexit. I'm a British person, we've got to talk about Brexit at some point, but I'll leave you with that for the moment and hand over and see what the other two think to that idea.
I'm Paata Sheshelidze from Georgia. I'm co-founder and the president of New Economic School Georgia, which is free market, non-governmental organization, and we are focused on educational project mostly. So let me share my views about the topic which was described by Barbara. NGOs are a very important part of society because via NGOs, people are having strong influence on decision making. But if we discuss in general, are NGOs failed or succeeded, I think we will be far from a real picture. That's why I'm like to share our experience, because we think that we are quite successful NGO, and results of our work is displayed by results of the countries, and I will try to share this info and the practice. Why I'm thinking that we are influential? So we are organized a lot of activity during the last 16 years that we are in current form. We organized more than 500 activities and more than 30,000 people attended. We have daily media, practically daily media coverage. We are quoted, we are recognized, and even more. In most cases, when we are talking about economic issues and related issues, we have the following discourse: we and others, like two opposites, because we are always trying to have our opinion, strong opinion. We are not hesitate to share this opinion, and we are strong in wording. So we are not playing that. We are trying to explain in a very clear manner. We recognize people and media. When they come to us, they know from which position we will comment. I have a lot of accidents when a taxi driver or shopkeeper is recognized, are you an expert on economic issue? And then all following debates, and most funny and popular questions, are we surviving? This kind of stuff. And I'm always trying to answer, are we surviving or not? But important is that we achieved this level by doing very simple stuff. We educate, educate, and educate. We are not lobbying anything. We are not doing any partisan policy. We are not selective. So we are educating. We are open for everyone. We are trying to give ideas to everyone. And we are not playing with that. So we are not supporting idea because our friends support, or vice versa. We are strong in the principles, and this is very important. If you want to influence, everybody should see you as a institute or person based on the principles. Otherwise, they will see you as a just ordinary player of political game, which we are not looking for. As I told, NGOs are a very powerful force. politicians are thinking about NGOs as competitors in public opinion creation of public opinion making. But same time, they can do nothing. They have to live with us. And this is a good point. And this is our space. And also, nowadays, technology allows us to communicate with people easily. Social media, websites, and other opportunities are in our sight. And we are often use them, almost every day. And we have chances to go and speak with people whom we don't know in person. We never see them, and we don't know exactly their minds. To summarize, I think, and generally, and particularly in our concrete example, NGOs are in the winning side. Only one point is very important to underline. At least we are not funded by any state projects, as many of our friends here. And this is important because independence shows also that you are demanded, you have chances to survive your own, and therefore when you are asking about one or another reforms, you are more trustful, more trusting. My point of view is the following. As information now is decentralized, since we don't have necessity to look TV or radio for info, because now via social media information is decentralized. We have websites, we have other options to disseminate information. As in these circumstances, we can play even a bigger role. We can be more creative, we can be more focused, and we can create even individual messages for different kind of people, even really individual messages for particular persons. And this is the challenge. I believe, and personally I am founder of one of the first NGO in Soviet time. It was 89, and co-founder of Association of Young Economists. So you can imagine it was 89, it was still in Soviet time. So like I'm a professional NGO guy, but always we were like in opposition of the government in one or another way, and opposition of the domination of the politicians. So I think that it's possible via this platform influence the people, attract them to move and support one or another idea. And I think modern technology, modern world is very supportive toward us. And we are eager to do it in future too. Thanks.
I work for British think tank Open Europe. I'm Belgian myself, but I represent the think tank in Brussels. Now, Open Europe, we've always been focusing on the European Union, advocating EU reform, not only to try to keep the Brits in, but also to make it work better in a more free market way for all Europeans. In the Brexit debate, we've been neutral. This was basically based on our ideas. We thought that Brexit could be a great thing for Britain, or it could be a bad thing, depending on circumstances. And I think we do represent, at least in the, let's say, the free market scene in the UK, or even worldwide, a lot of people. I think free marketeers are not unconditionally in favor of the EU, or not unconditionally against. Now Brexit has happened, so now we're pushing for a liberal Brexit, arguing in favor of solutions that would keep trade as unrestricted as possible. Before Brexit, we were calculating the cost of Brexit, the cost of regulations, suggesting EU reforms now, or highlighting the issues like, for example, how important is the EU passport really for the City of London, the financial services. It's very important for banks, much less important for insurance firms. So try to bring some clarity, which is often, I think, the approach we take. We try to bring clarity, and in that sense, linking that to our solutions. So journalists, they would be more than happy to report on a big research paper that we've written, because it gives them some material, and based on that we can actually slip our solutions into that. Apart from that, I think a good way of influencing debate is to write pretty short comments, 400 to 800 words, based on the political fight of the day, trying to recycle research that we've done in the past. We probably should do that a lot more, but that's, I think, quite important. It's not just about coming up with original ideas, but it's also about repetition. And repetition is the mother of education. Also very important is to link up with dissidents, not to preach for one's own church. Like, for example, when I organize debates in Brussels, I prefer to do that with organizations that are not necessarily on board, and then you can actually, you get their fan base to your panel debate, and they may be exposed to ideas that they would not be used to. Apart from that, of course, also networking. We've done a bit less of avoiding the traditional media. That's now the big thing, with politicians not bothering anymore to send out press releases, just writing things on their Facebook page. Great thing. We probably should do that more, but that's not what we've done. I still believe that, especially in the business that we are, which is, let's say, relatively, I wouldn't call it elitist, but catering to the field of experts, it remains important to get your message out into the mainstream media, if only to gain respectability for certain ideas among the small group of experts that, whether that's a good or a bad thing, in the end, do decide a lot of issues. Now, generally, I think what can our movement learn from the recent success of the anti-establishment movement, Trump, Brexit? Three things. First of all, what Richard already says, that don't shy away too much from politics. Be very critical to politicians, of course, very good, but it is a part of policy of sort of the world that we're operating in, so you cannot afford to just completely ignore it and stay in the academic ivory tower. I think that's what Trump effectively did. You can argue that he sort of suddenly got the Republicans to take protectionist stance against all the work that had been done by all the think tanks. So I think that's a lesson. Secondly, dare to be radical. It's good to be like Open Europe. We are pretty moderate. We try to present moderate solutions. I don't say that's bad. It's good, but I think it's also important to also be radical, to have certain parts of the movement that are radical. Nigel Farage, he always says that radical people really make the difference. I think in British politics, he's by far the most successful politician. He may not be perfect, but if you see what he's done, I mean, no politician can reach to his ankles. Third, straight talking, be politically incorrect, or I don't say, let's rephrase it, I don't think we have to be politically incorrect, but I think a part of our movement needs to be politically incorrect. With Open Europe, we are not politically incorrect, we are, I'd say, more politically correct. We try to keep everyone on board, we try not to shock people, and that's valuable, but I think in an intellectual movement you also need people that dare to curse in the church. To sum up those three things, I don't say that we only need radical people, that we only need politically incorrect people, or only need people who hang around politics, but we also need that. We need both things. Some people will be convinced by someone who's really like in your face, straight talking. Some people will be really shocked by that. They will not listen anymore. And different people are convinced by different approaches. So we should definitely not have any dogmas on that and be open. Finally, one thing I think that the libertarian movement definitely needs to learn is to dare to more challenge what I would call the anti-liberal cultural stance of the left, the cultural Marxism, as it's sometimes called, and I would describe it as victimism. For example, when libertarians are talking about terrorism, they tend to quickly try to look, okay, maybe, there's poverty. Not everyone does that, but maybe poverty is a source of this somehow. Same people in jail. Yeah, maybe it's the war on drugs. Maybe it's poverty. That's all fine to investigate that, but at the end of the day, what I think some of us do too quickly is to blame the system rather than the individual, which actually I would say goes against our ideology. And far too often, and I've been guilty of that, I think many people have been caught into the left-wing mindset of victimism, and I think it's something that we really need to avoid. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
We have 5 minutes left, but I think this was already food for thought for our conversation for the next couple of hours, tomorrow and Sunday. Nonetheless, are there any urgent pressing questions or comments right away? Then let me ask one question. Paata, why do you think we are NGOs? For me, NGO is a term that I rather would not ever use with us.
Well, maybe my language was just very Georgian. We mostly use this term instead of think tank. So, in generally, I prefer absolutely different term. Think act, not tank, but act. Think actors. This is term I prefer.
Okay. Another question. You also mentioned education. Do you think? And I want to put this here to the floor. Do you think if we educate, this will be enough? Because the point that Pieter made, presenting facts, and also actually what Richard said, just being very factual, should be actually our task as well, and not only educating. What do you think?
I think the Brexit campaign does destroy that argument to a great extent. This is the biggest thing that's happened in European politics for decades. Where were the think tanks in it? Yes, Open Europe and others have done a lot of work over the years preparing the ground. And yeah, I'd been writing things about how dreadful EU tax policy was and how the whole harmonisation agenda was a mistake. And we've been doing that for years. But what happened when the debate actually got in? It wasn't a factual debate. There wasn't a lot of think tank involvement, I think, yeah. It became a political thing, and it became, it was almost a precursor to Trump's, post-fact agenda, or whatever it's called. That a lot of it was about feeling and about political ideas rather than the sort of factual reasoned thing that we put out. And I think there was a lot of discomfort, I think, in the think tank world about the way that political campaign went. That some people were thinking, yes, I support this intellectually, I've got lots of reasoned arguments for this, but actually what the arguments being made is nothing to do with the sort of research that I've been doing. And I think tying back in with what we were saying before and what you were saying there is that, it's this, where do we go? How do we get these ideas out? Yes, there's a very important role for that factual groundwork, for putting out those ideas and for presenting the research to back it up. But also it does need somebody who's going to produce that spark and make people actually feel it rather than intellectualize it.
Daniel.
Yeah, just to add up to that. What in the end of the day we're selling something. And the question is, who are we selling it to? Of course, you're selling it to politicians, or we try to sell it to politicians. But what we should do more, and that was also mentioned on the panel, we need not necessarily educate people, but inform people. Therefore, we need to campaign. And campaigning means not to dumb a message down, but make it digestible. And a good friend of mine, she is the former head campaigner of the Democratic Alliance in South Africa, Helen Zille. And she always said, you have to shape your message so the educated 12-year-old can understand it. And she would always go to her son and ask, do you understand what I've written here? He said, no. Then she would just scrap it and then start anew. And that is something we're very bad at. We're very good at writing papers. And then we pat ourselves on the back, so that's a fantastic paper, it's written there. But in the end of the day, who's reading all of that? So we need to campaign better. And then at my second point, what we do, and you mentioned it already, we need to become more think-do tanks. Not only bring out a paper, but also tell people what they can actually do with it. And also find ourselves means what to do with it at the end of the day. We can all write all the papers we like about flat tax, so on and so forth. But unless we actually create a mechanism to show people what it really means, we will not be successful. And showing people what it means does not only target their brains, but also targets their stomachs. And that's where we need to go. Because, and that was perfectly shown in the Brexit campaign, that was not a brain decision. It was a stomach decision. And last but not least, again, stressing the point of going to politicians, but also collaborating between each other. Not only reading each other's papers, but forming alliances and actually working on issues jointly. Just one thing I'm doing at the moment, I'm working with 7 different think tanks in Europe on the issue of e-participation. We are organizing roundtables where we discuss what the state of play is and how we can actually utilize it, but what the different realities in Europe are. And then we combine it, and then we try to sell it in a digestible manner to politicians, but also to the public.
Thank you, Daniel. Please.
So maybe the problem is that we're focusing too much on argumentation rather than what most people you get convinced by, which is examples. I would say that Uber did more for licensing and Bitcoin did more for monetary policy than any think tank or even politician in the last 20 years.
True. Paata?
Well, what I'll try to comment on Barbara's question about education. So how I use this term is, of course, the following. Information, dissemination, information, rise the issue, discuss possible solutions and this kind of stuff. Also, which includes different kind of performance, including all that you think. But what I think also is that it's kind of a division of labor. We are an organization which does something. We cannot do everything. So we are not engaged in practical policy. But what we did, we educate people then who did practical policy. Many of our students participated in different level of economic reforms, and therefore we gave them lights. And we gave them direction. This is our focus. And of course, it's not enough for changes, but it's our focus and our mission. So inform people, give alternatives, explain how things work, show alternative results, and so on. So, like, this is like this is definition of the education what I was having in mind.
Thank you. And now, before we head over to the Dragon's Den competition, in 30 seconds, Richard, what are the no-goes in the cooperation between academia and think tanks from your side? What would you say is an absolute killer?
Oh, I don't think there are. I don't think there should be any. I think we need to get more involvement. The trouble is, back to your point, we're very good at producing intellectual things. Academics are very good at producing intellectual things. If we wanted to go out and create Uber, the last place we'd start would be a university. So it's the division of labour, I think. The think tank needs to bring together different people with different skills. Yes, the academics who are nice at writing papers and things, but also those more entrepreneurial, social entrepreneurial attitudes.
In other words, we are more now to be platforms and providers and enablers.
Yeah, that's not even the right, linkers, something like, yeah, bringing people together, create catalysts, creating that group of people that can work together to get an idea thought out first, produced, but then actually to implement it and get it accepted.
Okay, well, thank you. This was the first round for food of thought or forethought. I would ask the dragons to leave the room, and only number one, who is Ignacy Bolto, stays here. And I may ask the referees, the judges, to maybe sit in the front bench.